Hello everyone, it's Saoirse, and today we're finally going to talk about Pride and Prejudice. Can you believe it? This book took me maybe 2 or 3 months to read, and I try to just read one book at a time, and eventually it got to be so all-consuming, this frustration I had with this book, that I just had to read another one and then get back to it. So it just took forever. I did not love it, but we are going to stay positive and we're going to talk about some issues that I had with it, um, and hopefully learn a little something. Maybe you all have things to share about what you like about this book, because I know it is so popular. This is by Jane Austen. It was published in 1813, and it really is proof to me that there is something for everyone. There really is, and that is the magical thing about reading. That is the number one lesson that I get from this book. There are people that really, really enjoy this story, and that is fabulous because it exists for them. That's great. Also, I really wanted to wear a bonnet today. I had full intention of doing that, and I had a whole sweaty search in my garage. Could not find this bonnet that, is completely useless in my normal life, and this would have been the one time that it would have been really great to have it. But so here's your not period appropriate look that I pulled together. If I still had enough of my own hair, I would have loved to do a proper Regency look. But we'll look past it and we will just dive right in here. This is the fourth Austen book that I've read. I read Emma, then Sense and Sensibility, then Northanger Abbey. I didn't like any of them, but I keep trying. This was definitely my least favorite of all of them. And let me just say, I'm really disappointed by that because I wanted to love it. You should know by now I'm not somebody who goes into reading something that's really popular with the intention of not liking it and like being cooler than everybody because I don't like it. No, I wanted to love this. I want to love Jane Austen because it seems like such a nice, cozy community to be part of, the people who love Jane Austen. But as I've learned that like certain genres just aren't for me, I'm not somebody who enjoys cozy murder mysteries. I don't really enjoy romance in general unless it is extremely upsetting and passionate and there's a lot of stakes involved. In this book, there just weren't a whole lot of stakes. It was very chill. The third person narrative for me is usually, it's never my favorite thing. I like first person. And in this book, it especially hurt the story because I didn't feel like I got to know any of the characters and therefore didn't really care about any of them. There was no real symbolism, no deeper meaning in this book. It was a very surface level story, kind of a bit too much just hitting you over the head, like, don't believe your first impressions because people can surprise you. That's pretty much it. And that's just, it was really heavy-handed. It was heavy-handed. But I do recognize the importance of this book in the time that it was written, and that it was a big deal that a female writer could find success. And like, I could go on and on. Here's the thing. I'm getting ahead of myself. I often talk about how when people bring up Jane Austen, they tend to also bring up the Brontes. And I have an issue with that debate, but I also kind of understand it. Basically, Jane Austen died right around the time Charlotte Bronte was being born. So they're not contemporary writers. Contemporary? They were not alive at the same time writing. Jane Austen was a whole generation before. And so it's a very different world that the Brontes were born into. But everybody looks at it as like, oh, it's pre-1900s women writers. They're the same thing, so let's compare them. And then people run to pick a camp, either Austen or Bronte. And you don't have to do that. You don't have to. You can love them both, dislike them both, or you can like one or the other. it's up to you what resonates with you. And so when people do bring up that argument, it just frustrates me because, like, obviously the Brontes are my favorite. Charlotte Bronte is my favorite writer, and I don't want to have to put down another writer to say like why this writer is so great, um, because they weren't writing the same thing. That's the point. Jane Austen wrote very just droll, kind of simple stories, um, without a whole lot of intense emotion. And the Brontes wrote very wild, passionate, um, just, yeah, very exciting and like heart wrenching stories. Even when there was a romance element, it was not like, la di da. It was high stakes. Everything's getting burned to the ground, and my heart's getting ripped out. And the writing is where, like, also you just can't put them in the same class because Charlotte especially just wrote so poetically, and her sentences were like art. Jane Austen wasn't trying to do that, I don't think. Like, I really don't think she was trying to do that. She was more the kind of artist that just showed you exactly what she was saying in clear, simple, well, not so clear because these sentences are convoluted. Some of it was so confusing to read. And I'm well versed in reading literature from this era, and I had to just look at some of these sentences like, what in the world are you trying to say? So they're just very, very different writers. Let's not spend too much time on that. I already have. Basically, this book was just too long. It would have been a nice short story, I think. If you're going to write a long novel in which almost nothing happens, then the writing for me needs to be absolutely captivating. And that just wasn't the case here. This was just far, far too long without having the writing that would grip me and keep me reading something where there is no action. Because I don't care about there being action as long as the writing is beautiful. I was reading some discussion questions. Chicago Public Library says Pride and Prejudice is a novel about love and relationships, but without any descriptions of passion. And not all novels of the time were so devoid of passion. So, personally, I would rather watch Bridgerton, which I know, like, don't jump down my throat. It's not the same thing, but they're compared a lot, Austen and Bridgerton, because it's like the modern day style of Austen. And I know Austen's a product of her time, and Bridgerton's a product of its time. But the thing is that people in Austen's time did have sex. They did. Surprise, surprise. And there's just no feeling at all of, like, that they even wanted to kiss each other. It was just so bland. And you can say that sort of thing in language that you could get away with back then. You did not have to come right out and say anything blatantly sexual. But there's no attempt at that. Unless, if you want to point out a line in here that I missed that was very sexy to you, then please do. I would love to hear that. So there's this quote I found interesting at the end of this edition. There's a quote from Charlotte Bronte. It says, "I had not seen Pride and Prejudice till I had read that sentence of yours, and then I got the book. And what did I find? An accurate daguerreotyped portrait of a commonplace face, a carefully fenced, highly cultivated garden with neat borders and delicate flowers, but no glance of a bright, vivid physiognomy, no open country, no fresh air, no blue hill, no bonny beck. I should hardly like to live with her ladies and gentlemen, in their elegant but confined houses. These observations will probably irritate you, but I shall run the risk." That was a letter she wrote to someone. And that kind of sums it up perfectly. My girl Charlotte Bronte coming through with my issue with Pride and Prejudice and Jane Austen in general. Why is this light so bright? It's that she doesn't make an effort to describe the surroundings in a way that, like, puts us in that place and gives us feelings about that place. Even just in this a couple sentences of criticism from Charlotte Bronte, she's using this description. And the thing about the Brontes is they lived in the moors, and so there was a lot of description of nature, and it was gorgeous. And that's just, it felt like it was missing for me because, okay, if we are to compare, it is also like pastoral England in the 19th century, and I just want a little, I want to feel that, you know? So I really loved that bit of criticism. I think that makes a lot of sense. So, okay, if everybody's still with me and doesn't hate me for not liking this book, I don't know why I'm so irrationally afraid of everybody just being so mad. It's like Austen fans aren't mean, I hope. And I'm not bashing. Like, what she did was very important and should still be celebrated today. I just don't think that the writing holds up if you're looking at it through a lens of like what you can read now, what's available now. Whereas some classics absolutely do hold up, in my opinion. This is all my opinion. Hence why I call things, you know, thoughts, because these are just my thoughts, not anybody else's. Okay, so let's dig into some of the things that stood out to me in this book. Right at the beginning here. I just picked out like something that was humorous to me because everybody calls Jane Austen funny. And I think I've chuckled at a few of her lines throughout the books I've read, not many. But this bit where the Bennets are all talking and Kitty is just coughing her brains out. And Mrs. Bennet says, "Don't keep coughing so, Kitty, for heaven's sake, have a little compassion on my nerves, you tear them to pieces." Her father says, "Kitty has no discretion in her coughs, she times them ill." And Kitty says, "I do not cough for my own amusement." I just like that, because my mom sneezes like 14 times in a row, and sometimes I'm like, that's ridiculous, and she's like, "Well, I'm not doing it for fun." So I just like that line. Let's see. Okay, this is Elizabeth's friend Charlotte talking. "Happiness in marriage is entirely a matter of chance. If the dispositions of the parties are ever so well known to each other, or ever so similar beforehand, it does not advance their felicity in the least. They always continue to grow sufficiently unlike afterwards to have their share of vexation, and it is better to know as little as possible of the defects of the person with whom you are to pass your life." I hope we're supposed to take issue with that. Are we supposed to? Is she writing that, like, ironically? Because to not know any of the defects of the person that you're going to marry, I don't think that's better. I don't think that's better. And let's all just take a moment to think of poor Charlotte having to marry Mr. Collins. Oh. Now, see, that's the thing, is there are characters in Austen's books where they are characterized very well. Like, these characters are clear. Like, I can see Mrs. Bennet, and I can see Mr. Collins, and even Lady Catherine and Lydia, because they are such caricatures, I guess. And maybe that's what she's better at, is just caricatures. You know, there's not any real, like, substance to these people. They're just ridiculous. And that makes them very easy to picture. Whereas Lizzie, you know, I wanted to see her the way that people talk about her, as this, you know, obstinate, headstrong girl that just has a mind of her own and whatever. But it just didn't feel that from the descriptions in here. But yeah, Mr. Collins is a fool. He might have been like the funniest part. Okay, this is Miss Bingley talking to Mr. Darcy, and she says, "How long has she been such a favorite?" Talking about Lizzie. "And pray, when am I to wish you joy?" Mr. Darcy says, "That is exactly the question which I expected you to ask. A lady's imagination is very rapid. It jumps from admiration to love, from love to matrimony in a moment. I knew you would be wishing me joy." And I wrote, maybe Mr. Darcy shouldn't be so sure of himself. He's a little cocky, and the fact that we're supposed to find him very good and just he's like a good guy in the end. I don't know. He's got his issues. He's cocky. He makes comments about women that are not founded in reality. Okay, so the amount of times that the word pride is in this book, it's like, I get it, it's the title. And by the way, like, when I think about what was my preconception of this story, I will tell you it is completely different from what it actually is. Obviously, you grow up, especially, as a reader in a literary environment, like, I got a degree in English and then a degree in creative writing. You hear about Pride and Prejudice a lot. And when I heard that title, I always thought, oh, this is going to be such a serious, like, deep, brooding, intense story, Pride and Prejudice. Like, and then you see the images from the 2005 movie, and it's like, oh, what is this? And then you read it, and it's just this absurd, like, parlor humor. I don't know. The title doesn't, to me, it does not work for what the story actually is. And it was originally titled First Impressions, which maybe fits it a bit better, I think. Who says this? Vanity is a weakness indeed, but pride, where there is a real superiority of mind, pride will always be under good regulation. I don't know why I noted that. Just one of the points that they talk about pride. And again, like, Mr. Darcy's not perfect. He has this ridiculous pride for what? I'm sorry, what is up with this light? I have severe electrical issues. I'm like so washed out in half this video. I have electrical issues in this part of the house. In case you were wondering. Mr. Collins. I hate him so much. I have often observed how little young ladies are interested by books of a serious stamp, though written solely for their benefit. It amazes me, I confess, for certainly there can be nothing so advantageous to them as instruction. But I will no longer importune my young cousin. Ew. Go away. Hate that. Yeah. And I think she's obviously using him as a way to say, like, this kind of behavior and that these thoughts about women are not correct. You should not like this guy. He's dumb. Is this... Oh, another bit about pride, huh? It is wonderful, replied Wickham, for almost all his actions may be traced to pride, and pride has often been his best friend. It has connected him nearer with virtue than any other feeling, but we are none of us consistent, and in his behavior to me there were stronger impulses even than pride. Oh, how about Wickham? What an awful, manipulative, gaslighting fool. I hate him. So he's talking about Mr. Darcy having issues with pride, and like, what about you, buddy? What about you? Whatever, we won't get into that. Obviously, he's a villain. There's so many dances. Mr. Collins, awkward and solemn, apologizing instead of attending, and often moving wrong without being aware of it, gave her all the shame and misery which a disagreeable partner for a couple of dances can give. The moment of her release from him was ecstasy. And I wrote, we've all been there. Whether you're dancing or not, just you have a ridiculous date that you are so embarrassed by, and you're like, I do not claim this. I barely know this person. Please don't associate me with them. And then you finally get to get away from them. Ugh. Who is talking here? There are sometimes, and even I saw that Jane Austen acknowledged this somewhere, that she didn't really specify who was talking, and the dialogue is super confusing. Anyway, I think this is Elizabeth and Darcy. Both, replied Elizabeth archly, for I have always seen a great similarity in the turn of our minds. We are each of an unsocial, taciturn disposition, unwilling to speak, unless we expect to say something that will amaze the whole room, and be handed down to posterity with all the eclat of a proverb. I really like that part. Like, we will not talk unless we're going to say something that's going to be amazing, and everybody's going to be just wowed by it. I like that, you know, finally, and we don't get much, but this one moment of we understand what's similar between Darcy and Elizabeth, because this is one of those love stories for me where we're kind of left wondering, wait, what? Why are they in love? Like, what? I don't get it. There's no connection or anything. So we get that one little moment of like, oh, we're both kind of like jerks. Like we don't think it's worth speaking unless we're really gonna amaze everyone. Um, Little bit of connection, which is nice. Oh, Mr. Collins. I wrote sexist pig on this one, so let's see what it says. When I do myself the honor of speaking to you next on the subject, I shall hope to receive a more favorable answer than you have now given me. This is when he proposes to Lizzie. Though I am far from accusing you of cruelty at present, because I know it to be the established custom of your sex to reject a man on the first application, and perhaps you have even now said as much to encourage my suit as would be consistent with the true delicacy of the female character. Ooh, here's a guy who knows literally nothing about women. This poor bumbling fool who was just not raised well and never bothered to learn. Can you imagine proposing to somebody and they clearly don't want you, and then you just say it's because they're a woman that they have to play hard to get? I did like the bits where Lizzie stands up for herself. Like, I'm not doing this. I'm not saying no because I'm playing hard to get. I'm not saying I can't play piano because I have some, like, modesty that I'm, what does she say? I don't know. Like a show of modesty when really she's not modest. She just isn't that good at piano, and I like those little moments. This is gonna have to be a longer video. Oh dear. How does it always happen? What happens here? Not that I have much pleasure indeed in talking to anybody. People who suffer as I do from nervous complaints can have no great inclination for talking. Nobody can tell what I suffer, but it is always so. Those who do not complain are never pitied. That's Mrs. Bennet, if you couldn't guess. She is such a caricature, and she's always complaining about her nervous whatever. I don't know. Sometimes I think, like, okay, she's obviously ridiculous, but then I think, what if she really has, like, an anxiety disorder that obviously would not have been diagnosed or treated in the early 19th century? And I feel a bit bad for her in that regard. Like, she has to complain and be seen as this fool in order to just, like, voice the fact that she's got severe anxiety. And if that is the case, I'm like, I feel you. I've been there. But if she is just an annoying, silly person, then that's a different story. But yeah, it's just weird that we're supposed to laugh at that. But it could really be a very different thing. Okay, what is this? I wrote gross and sad. Gross and sad. Oh yeah. So Charlotte Lucas is marrying Mr. Collins, who the house where the Bennets live, it's entailed upon him, so he's going to inherit it and not any of the girls. Lady Lucas began directly to calculate, with more interest than the matter had ever excited before, how many years longer Mr. Bennet was likely to live. And Sir William gave it as his decided opinion that whenever Mr. Collins should be in possession of the Longbourn estate, it would be highly expedient that both he and his wife should make their appearance at St. James. Which is just depressing. Like, when's this guy gonna die so we can take his house? Without thinking highly of either men or of matrimony, marriage had always been her object. It was the only honorable provision for well-educated young women of small fortune, and however uncertain of giving happiness, must be their pleasantest preservative from want. This preservative she had now obtained, and at the age of 27, without having ever been handsome, she felt all the good luck of it. God, that's depressing. Thankful that that's changed. Let's see who's talking here. Charlotte. You must be surprised, very much surprised, so lately as Mr. Collins was wishing to marry you. But when you have had time to think it all over, I hope you will be satisfied with what I have done. I am not romantic, you know. I never was. I ask only a comfortable home, and considering Mr. Collins' character, connections, and situation in life, I am convinced that my chance of happiness with him is as fair as most people can boast on entering the marriage state. I wrote, romance. Marriages that are basically a business deal are just so sad. But yeah, that's reality for a lot of people even today. Oh, okay. So when Lizzie is going to go basically on holiday with her aunt and uncle, she says, what delight, what felicity, you give me fresh life and vigor. What are men to rocks and mountains? Oh, what hours of transport we shall spend! And when we do return, it shall not be like other travelers, without being able to give one accurate idea of anything. We will know where we have gone. We will recollect what we have seen. Lakes, mountains, and rivers shall not be jumbled together in our imaginations, nor, when we attempt to describe any particular scene, will we begin quarreling about its relative situation. Let our first effusions be less insupportable than those of the generality of travelers. And I wrote, this might be my favorite sentence in this book. Because it's like the one time where I feel like she's making a good point here. Like, it's just an interesting point about travelers kind of not really taking in everything that they see. And she's fully ready to just go live in the moment and experience something else. She wants to get away from this drama that's been going on at home. You know, as not really dramatic as it is her version of drama. Yeah, I just liked that sentence. I like any mention of nature, so thank you for that tiny little passage. So there's the famous bit here when Darcy proposes. Lizzie says, from the very beginning, from the first moment, I may almost say, of my acquaintance with you, your manners impressing me with the fullest belief of your arrogance, your conceit, and your selfish disdain of the feelings of others, were such as to form that groundwork of disapprobation on which succeeding events have built so immovable a dislike. First of all, what a clunky sentence. Did people really talk like that? No, they couldn't have. I mean, that's insane. And I had not known you a month before I felt that you were the last man in the world whom I could ever be prevailed on to marry. And so here's where I must mention the whole enemies to lovers trope is so absurd. It's how often in real life does that happen? Do you know anyone who like violently hated someone and then fell in love with them? I don't know. It just when that's done in stories, it's like, oh, come on. Like even in the latest season of Bridgerton, I was just like, they don't need to hate each other so much at first, because obviously they're attracted to each other. We don't have to go through this whole whatever, then there wouldn't be a story. Anyway, not my favorite version of a love story. Just a bit too unrealistic to me. I mean, I've never personally hated somebody and then thought, ooh, I'd like quite fancy that. Like to marry them. Okay, so comparing Wickham and Darcy, there certainly was some great mismanagement in the education of those two young men. One has got all the goodness and the other all the appearance of it. So, meaning Darcy has all the goodness, but everybody thinks Wickham is the good guy. They're just sneaky snakes, these boys. Especially Wickham. But like, why does Darcy have to be so... Why does he just have to stand there with that mug like everything sucks? You know, if you're in love, like, damn, show it a little bit. Just looks so miserable all the time. Anyway, so the moment when Lizzie falls in love, starts to fall in love, is when she sees Darcy's beautiful house. They were all of them warm in their admiration, and at that moment she felt that to be mistress of Pemberley might be something. So, I mean, I get it. Relatable. You fell in love with a house. He's got a gorgeous property. Like, lock that down. But, like, for that to be the moment when it changes for her is so shallow. Uh, like, I get it. It's beautiful, and I would also want to live there, but, ooh, it's so shallow. Okay, moving on. I'm just like, is that really what we're supposed to be getting from this? With astonishment did Elizabeth see that her new acquaintance was at least as much embarrassed as herself. This is Darcy's sister, Georgiana. Since her being at Lambton, she had heard that Miss Darcy was exceedingly proud, but the observation of a very few minutes convinced her that she was only exceedingly shy. She found it difficult to obtain even a word from her beyond a monosyllable. And then it says Georgiana's reception of them was very civil, but attended with all that embarrassment which, though proceeding from shyness and the fear of doing wrong, would easily give to those who felt themselves inferior the belief of her being proud and reserved. Mrs. Gardiner and her niece, however, did her justice and pitied her. So this is one other moment where I feel like, oh, she's making a good point here. She's making a really fine observation, which is that shyness is so often taken for rudeness. And that resonated with me because I've always been really shy, or I was more so in the past, like up through probably like the end of middle school. I was really shy, especially as a very young kid, and people thought that I was mean and stuck up and a snob, and because I didn't talk. And that wasn't why. I was just terrified. And even now I'm like, I can't make phone calls, and I get really nervous with new people, and so people probably still think that I'm kind of snobbish, but that is not what it is. So I love that she makes that point here. And I wrote, don't believe others' impressions or your own. So believing other people who say, like, this person you've never met is really nasty. Don't listen to that. Wait and form your own opinion. But then also, don't trust your own opinion until you've maybe talked to them more than once. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like that's the whole point of this book is, like, you don't know somebody right away. And you don't know them based off of their facial expressions and what other people say about them. And this is a great example of you always want what you can't have. She wanted to hear of him when there seemed to be the least chance of gaining intelligence. She was convinced that she could have been happy with him when it was no longer likely they should meet. If we have not all just done that before, when we're not that into a guy and then it seems like they're kind of slipping away and they're not interested anymore, and we're like, oh, wait, maybe we would have worked out if I had just seen how wonderful this totally average person is. Yeah. Relatable. Moving toward the end here. This whole bit where Darcy explains about himself. I have been a selfish being all my life in practice, though not in principle. As a child I was taught what was right, but I was not taught to correct my temper. I was given good principles, but left to follow them in pride and conceit. Unfortunately an only son, for many years an only child, I was spoiled by my parents, who, though good themselves, my father particularly, all that was benevolent and amiable, allowed, encouraged, almost taught me to be selfish and overbearing, to care for none beyond my own family circle, to think meanly of all the rest of the world, to wish at least to think meanly of their sense and worth compared with my own. Such I was from 8 to 28, and such I might still have been but for you, dearest, loveliest Elizabeth. I guess I'm the same age as Mr. Darcy. Hey. So this is just super expositional. Expositional? It's a lot of exposition. This should have come out, see, the thing is, it should have come out in, like, bits and pieces throughout getting to know this character. Instead, we get it all at the end here, this big old paragraph that is not really the way that anybody would ever speak. We didn't need that. Like, that, we could have gotten that information over time from his sister, or I think it was the housekeeper that works at Pemberley, who was singing his praises and all that, but we could have gotten some more information from other people so it wasn't this massive paragraph. Anyway, just a little nitpick. Lizzie and Jane are talking, and Lizzie says, or Jane asks, "Will you tell me how long you have loved him?" And Lizzie says, "It has been coming on so gradually that I hardly know when it began, but I believe I must date it from my first seeing his beautiful grounds at Pemberley." Are we supposed to celebrate the shallowness of that statement, or is she just being funny? I don't know. Um, ah. But then this bit that it's like Darcy's turn to explain when he fell in love. He said, "I cannot fix on the hour or the spot or the look or the words which laid the foundation. It is too long ago. I was in the middle before I knew that I had begun." And that's like perfect. Not bad. Love is messy, and sometimes you can't pinpoint when you fell in love or when you started to. He says it very well there. I like that. Okay, so let's leave it at that for the book. And I will say I did so much like research trying to get myself to understand the appeal of this story. So I went and watched the 2005 movie with Keira Knightley, and then I watched the 1995 miniseries with Colin Firth. I did all of this. Like, I really tried, you guys. I really tried. Did not like the Keira Knightley movie. Aside from just the really inaccurate costumes and everything, it was just too rushed, literally rushed, to the point where I had to have subtitles on because I was like, am I speaking the same language as them? I could not understand what these people were saying. They talked so fast, and it was just, I don't know, not a well-written script. Some of the shots were pretty, but you did not get to know the characters at all. I didn't feel like the way they represented Lizzie was, what the book was going for. Darcy was basically a piece of cardboard. But then the miniseries version, I was so pleasantly surprised by. I actually got into it because it was well written, very well acted, great costumes and hair. And yeah, I enjoyed it. If you've seen both of them, what are your thoughts? And are there other versions like from the past that might be worth checking out? I still haven't watched any adaptations of the other Austen books that I've read, so I think I will go and watch Emma soon. But yeah, I think that the miniseries, it did like give enough room to breathe for this story because it is such a long story, and there are a lot of details, even though, like I said, not really much happens. It's kind of frustrating that you have 3 volumes, and the whole first one, you're like, oh, Darcy and Lizzie hate each other. And then the second one, I think it's the second one, he just kind of disappears, and there's not really anything. You're just worried about Jane and Bingley. And then they see each other again, and then he's proposing out of nowhere. And then we're all concerned about Lydia running away with Wickham, which is so gross. And then everybody's getting married in the end, and it's just like, the pacing on that was a bit weird. Huh. But I did it. I finished it. I think I'm going to take a little break before I dive into the final couple of Austen books that I have. I have Persuasion and Mansfield Park. Are they any good? Are they better? What do you like about these stories? What am I missing? Because I want to see it. But then again, maybe this style is just not for me, and that is fine. And I completely respect everybody who loves these books. I am so happy for you that you have something like this to love, because that's really important. And there are so many books that mean a lot to me in my life and have made a difference and make me feel cozy and nice, which I think is what these books do for people. I certainly felt that way watching the miniseries. I kind of feel like I might curl up and watch it again. But as for reading that type of story, it's just, oh my lord, have mercy. Oh my god, I have this alarm to remind me to do French on Duolingo. Wow, my heart just came out of my chest. What on earth was I saying? God, I don't remember. I was talking about, I might have to edit this out. I was talking about watching the miniseries again. Oh yeah, reading something like this, it is too time consuming for the amount of like enjoyment that you actually get out of it. I had another point to make, but that alarm just took my whole soul and life away from me. So thank you very much for watching. Let me know what you thought about this book. Just tell me everything on your mind, and let's all be nice to each other. And until next time, happy reading. I will come back with a George Saunders book soon, hopefully. I've been reading some good stuff lately. I'm like back into my reading swing, which is nice after so long struggling. Okay. Thank you for watching. I will see you all next time.